When it comes to horror, there's two things that may pop up in your brain: slasher and jump scares. But there's another medium out there when it comes to horror, and that's ghost stories. And no, I'm not talking about that ghost story. To be honest, as of this episode, I have not watched that, but at some point I will. Let's just say ghost stories are one of those tropes in the horror industry that could make or break. But lately, I've actually been falling in love with ghost stories. In general, though, just the formula is pretty interesting because A, you have someone that has sixth sense that can see things, which makes their character interesting. B, history. To be honest, I was never always into ghost stories or storytelling when it comes to ghosts or hauntings. It was the same for vampires for a while until I watched Hellsing. But the one franchise, or at least one series, that got me into ghost stories in general in any media is the Fatal Frame series. This was pretty much the whole reason I got into ghost stories, is because of Fatal Frame. Because it was a unique horror video game series, using a camera to fight off against ghosts that would try to kill you or see remnants of the past. I just thought it was a very clever idea, and mechanic wise, it's interesting. But this pretty much actually inspired me to create my own horror story when it comes to ghosts or hauntings or poltergeists. And then, we've had several ghost stories back then during the glory days of the 1980s, but I feel like it's gotten maybe a little more popular. I don't know. To me personally, Fatal Frame was the stepping stone for that. At least with me, that is. But actually, before I started playing the Fatal Frame games, I did start Ghost Hunt, the anime, and then stopped for a while. And then I did jump back in after getting into Fatal Frame. And by that point, I really fell in love with that genre. Ghost Hunt was a really good anime. You could check out my review for it here on the show. But yeah, I just like the whole thing with people that are gifted to see things. It's very interesting. I do know at least one person that I talked to that could see specific things, more like a remnants of the past, I guess, or future, or a little bit of something that it was weird, but very interesting. And the more I look into the ghost stuff, the more intrigued I get, because you never know. They could be out there, but my friend Matt would suggest otherwise. Yeah, so Fatal Frame was the stepping stone for that. Ghost Hunt expanded on that. Now, I have mentioned before that the film media tends to be a hit or miss, except for the glory days of films back then. But there have been great ones that have come out for the film side of things, at least. Last Night in Soho was one. I really liked that movie. It was very unique, and the big twists and turns. Really good ghost story, I gotta say. And by that point, I was already into Fatal Frame and all that. And Last Night in Soho is just one of those good films, ghost films. I mean, would I consider Lights Out being a ghost film? I guess. I know the producer that made The Conjuring helped on this film, and it was a really good one, and really good horror movie. But The Conjuring would be the decent horror movie as of today, and that has to do with ghosts, hauntings, stuff like that, poltergeist. That's another one that I also like. I know I watched that before getting into Fatal Frame. And then, the poltergeist movie, that one's a weird one. I kind of didn't watch it, but sort of did at the same time. Anyways, yeah, and thanks to Fatal Frame, I would not be into ghost stories like I would be now. It would be the same with Hellsing. Without Hellsing, I really don't think I would be into vampires that much, but Hellsing got me into vampires. And so now I like vampire stories, which I'm also writing one myself. And that is why I think ghost films or ghost games and stuff like that are really interesting in that field. I'm sure you'll find a lot of there are some ups and downs, like the Winchester I heard is not that great. Well, I hope you enjoyed this discussion episode. If you like what you saw here, please follow me. You could also check out the reviews and top 10s on this show. There's a lot to cover when it comes to the horror genre, and I have fun doing it. But what do you guys think? What is your favorite horror genre? Does it have to do with ghosts, slashers, jump scares, or anything else that you think maybe the horror genre should dive into that has never been explored? They've done psychological slashers. They've done most of that And I do find the ghost portion really good. It just depends if it's written right. Anyways, peace.
Well, ever since I ever started this journey looking for a dog, it's always led me to nightmarish places. So bad. But I was still determined to look for a dog. So every so often, I would go to different places across every universe of pop culture medias to find a dog. However, my worst fears, besides going to a place called Silent Hill, one of the worst things I could ever encounter was ghosts. Ghosts is probably the worst things I ever encountered in my life. Even when I try to look for a dog, they're either ghosts or there's just ghosts all over the place. Why do I even go to these places for? I just want a dog. That's all I want in life. I just want a dog. I am still determined to get a dog. But every time I try, I always run into terrible things. Such terrible things. Ghosts. Ghosts are probably the most horrible things I ever run into. I just want a dog.